Hello fellow StarCraft 2 players, this is another Gosubuilds guide. This time we're going to be looking at a TVP build, and this is the very basic 1 Rax FE into 2 Medivac timing. This is the build that you've seen probably every single Terran, if you followed the pro scene that is, you've probably seen every single Terran do this build at one point in time. It's about as standard as you can possibly be in this matchup, and for that matter, for that reason, everyone basically has done it. It's a good build in basically the metagame since 2011, so it's been really consistent as well. And it's definitely a fallback build that everyone goes to. There are slight variations that you can do, but in general, this build, as is pretty bread and butter for this matchup. So it starts off with a 10 depot, nothing special, and it's going to be a 1 Rax FE, just like we've seen time and time again. But it starts off with the 10 depot, and then you'll see in a second we're going to have the 12 racks go down just like we always do. If I could just center on this SCV. Usually you can use the same SCV to build it, and at exactly 150 minerals you're going to be plopping down that 12 racks right there. And then because this is a 1 Rax FE, we're not going to be getting gas. We're going to be avoiding gas up until around 16 supply when we start our orbital, and then we finally get our command center. So all on no gas, we're just going to be going straight for command center. It's a very economic build for this reason. We go straight for command center, and basically it's safe is the other reason. So it's about as economical as you can be without losing the straight up cheese like a proxy 2 gate or something like that. But there are later attacks, obviously, which this build has trouble with, and we'll look at those later in this video. So, notice how I've just been constantly building SCVs, all builds on Gosubuilds, and all builds in the pro scene at all, except for some certain all-ins, are very consistent in the SCV production, and this build is definitely no different. As soon as the barracks finishes, you want to be starting that Marine, and then as soon as that SCV finishes, you start the orbital command. So that's a 16 Marine and 17 orbital command. And then right here we see as soon as you get to the natural, you'll have about 400 mins at 17 supply. Notice how only 1 Marine was built, but at 17 supply you'll have 400 mins to plop down this command center. So just again, to make that pretty precise, you build 1 Marine, and then you get the orbital, and then you cut the 2nd Marine, and then you start the command center in the low ground. You can build it on the high ground, and you can build this depot before the command center, but these are all subtle variations, and some of them have their own build orders on Gosubuilds that you can take a look at. But this build, you get 1 Marine, you cut the 2nd one, and then you start your command center on the low ground at 17 supply, then following it up with this depot right here. And usually you want to make this depot to make a wall, because walls are really good to avoid early stalk or harass. That can be annoying. And then after you have this setup, your normal setup is going to be just like almost all TVP builds, 1 Rax FE, then you throw down 2 more racks to get your 3 racks going. And then very soon after, we'll see a bunker go down. And the timing of this bunker, if you see your opponent chrono boosting like multiple zealots, you can get this bunker earlier, you can play super safe. But this bunker in general needs to be done by around the 5-minute mark, and you'll see it'll be done just after it this time around. But around 5 minutes is when the first zealot and stalker can get to your base, so you want to make sure it's done by that time. And then once you have that set up, your normal setup with the orbital, the bunker, and your 3 racks, you get to then follow up with both gas geysers in your main. And these gas geysers are going to help you tech up for Medivacs, for Stim, for Marauders, for everything that this build really loves. But in the meantime, you're still staying on mainly Marines and spending the gas on tech as opposed to Army. So, normal stuff's happening. We now have both command centers done right then. We put people in gas, we have both command centers done, and you see I'm slacking a little bit on the SCVs. That's a problem. But make sure you have 1 or 2 SCVs queued up the whole time, because you need to have constant SCV production with this build. As soon as you can, you get the tech lab. It's at 25 gas, your first 25 gas. Cut a Marine if you have to. You need to get this tech lab started as soon as possible to kickstart your stim pack research, which you'll see exactly 100 gas, you can start stim. Perfect. In order to do this, however, and still tech up, you need to be staying on mainly Marines. So you'll see this game, no Marauders will come out of these barracks for quite some time. Then at around 75 gas, which is what it takes to build a reactor and a tech lab, you can then plop down the reactor and tech lab. So now all your barracks will have add-ons, and everything will be able to produce to your maximum production. Notice how at 7 minutes, you have 2 add-ons building, which will take quite some time, and you're making 1 Marine at a time. So 7-minute to 8-minute all-ins by Protoss are going to be very hard to deal with. So if you scout something, if you don't see an expo by your opponent, now is the time where you should have been prepared, and you shouldn't be building these add-ons. You should just making units, 3 Marines at a time. After this, once you have all these add-ons started, notice how I'm still only making Marines. You put the NG Bay, the factory, and third gas. All of those happen at around the same time. So again, stim, and then you get these 2 add-ons, and then you go for NG Bay, factory, and third gas, all at the same time. And you'll see that you'll have around 100 gas to start the factory, and that'll be your clue to get all 3 of those buildings together. And then finally, once this factory finishes, and you start the starport and reactor to swap off to get reactor medevacs, now you can finally start making marauders. So now is when your army starts to get juicy and really strong, heading for your timing attack against Protoss at around the 10-minute mark. Notice how I'm still building depots, don't ever get supply blocked, just constantly be building SCVs, and then you want constant production on these barracks, you want +1 attack, and then you want all the upgrades. There's stim, there's combat shields, and then soon later, once stim is done, you can start concussive shells over here. But for the time being, you want to stay on only Marines and not get any of these researches up until this factory and starport, until the factory's finished and the starport is started. And then you can finally get +1 combat shields, marauders, and all the gas units. And that way, your factory will be as early as you can, and your timing attack will be a lot earlier because you're pushing with these 2 medevacs. So if we keep going, you'll see that it's going to be around the 10-minute mark when these medevacs pop out, and you will have stim already done, so you can, in case your opponent's doing an early 2-base timing, now's around the time when you can defend it because you have stim. You'll have combat shields, you have concussive shells, and you'll have these medevacs, so it's a great timing. And +1 also. Right there. Now the follow-up to this build, a lot of different follow-ups are totally possible. But the most common is to get a 3rd command center either in here in your base or at the 3rd, or 2 more racks first. The Muslim and more aggressive Terrans like to get, like Illusion, like to get the 2 racks first and then get the 3rd, and this allows you to put on a lot more pressure in Protoss, and when you're trading units and when you're fighting with this army right here, you actually have the opportunity to reinforce it so you can continue fighting. While more macro-oriented players, sometimes MVP, but definitely Thorzane, always get this 3rd command center first, because they like to kickstart their late game, try to get all 6 gas gougers, go for the Ghost, the Vikings, and the super late game focus play a lot earlier. So those are the 2 most common transitions, and obviously you want to continue getting upgrades, and you want to be getting Vikings or Ghosts, depending upon what your opponent's doing. And also notice that we're at 100 supply at the 10-minute mark, and that's what you should be going for. So, to recap, this build is a 10 depot, 12 racks, then orbital command, then you get your command center on the low ground at 17 supply before your 2nd Marine, and then you get the depot, and then you can resume Marine and SCV production. And then when you have 300 mins, you throw down 2 more barracks, and then when you have the 150 mins, you throw down these 2 gas geysers to get you into the 2 base, 3 barracks, 2 gas. And then you can also fit this bunker after the gas, before the 2 racks. That's really up to you. Depends what you're scouting, or if you just want to play standard, get the 2 racks and then get the bunker. But it's kind of a scouting thing. If you feel unsafe, then get the bunker earlier. If you feel pretty confident or there's a ramp leading up to your natural, then don't feel like you need to rush this bunker at all. It's totally fine to get a little bit later. And especially if you see Nexus first from your opponent is another reason that you don't need this bunker that early. Again, small scouting things, but regardless, you're on 3 barracks and 2 gas, and then at 25 gas, you get a tech lab. At 100 gas, as soon as this tech lab finishes, you will be getting stim. And then finally, you get to add on these other add-ons. And again, if your opponent's all-inning you, or if you haven't seen an expansion by your opponent, usually by around the 6-minute mark, you should know not to start these 2 add-ons and just constantly be making Marines, maybe even get a bunker in your main, extra bunkers in the front, and be ready to pull SCVs because it's probably an all-in, and even if it isn't, you can treat it as such because you have such a good economy. So, you get these add-ons, and that's with your first 75 gas after you've started stim. Then, with your next 100 gas, you get the factory, which was right here, the NG bay, and the third gas. And those three things always go together, and it's a good way to remember kind of how your build's going. You want to clump things into units. So the first thing's the barracks, the next thing's these two racks, the next thing's these two gas, and then the factory, NG bay, and third gas are the next unit that you're trying to get to. And once you've started this factory, as soon as it finishes, you should have 150 gas. You can throw down the starport and the reactor on the factory and then swap off like we see I've already done. And this lets you get Medivacs out as fast as possible. Once you've started this starport, all these add-ons can finally start making out of them. Basically, you can make Marauders, you can spend the gas on combat shields, you can spend the gas on concussive shells, you can spend the gas on infantry level 1, but you really can't afford it if you're trying to rush for Medivacs as fast as we are in order to get out to before the 10-minute mark and hopefully push your opponent very soon after. And then once you have those 2 Medivacs, you get to push out. We see in this game I had just under 50 SCVs. You can theoretically, I've timed it out, I did a game where I did it 100% perfectly, you can get to 53 SCVs, but the general rule is you want to get 50 or more. So this game, I actually had poor SCV production. You want to be at 50 SCVs minimum, with up to 53 if you're doing very, very well. And this happened because there was a supply block and I forgot to build 1 or 2 SCVs in the middle, but that's okay. And then you're pushing out with around 30, 35 Marine Marauder, your first 2 Medivacs, and then you want to be rallied towards your army. If you see right now, this is my rally point of the barracks, but soon after I'll change it to over here or something like this to be more aggressive, because once we have Medivacs in TVP, you get to be the aggressor, you get to push out, you get to take map control, you can take all the watchtowers, you can check for the third, you can see whether they're going High Templar or whether they're going Colossus, and you can react accordingly, and you basically get your mid-game completely established once these Medivacs are out. So, again, you want to be rallied aggressively to keep that going, to make sure you have the map control. Now, if I may step back really quickly, I just want to talk about some things in the early game. I've kind of mentioned them already, but they're still important. So if I step back to probably around the 5-minute mark would be good. There's some subtle things with scouting that really help you out a lot. And this will go for all TVP 1-Rex FEs. I'm just going to talk about them now, and I'll just reference this video because I feel like this is a good place to do it. Once you've gotten this CC down, right around here, notice how my SCV scouted after the barracks. It wasn't an early scout, but it was after the barracks. It's around 3:45, 4 minutes, whatever. You get to see whether your opponent went Nexus first, and you get to go into your base, and if they didn't go Nexus first, you'll see the gateway, you'll see the cyber core, you'll see where the chrono boost is going, and you'll see the gas count. Obviously, I'm playing versus a very easy AI, so you would never see a forge and a gateway and a gas, because that's just the worst thing ever. But if you see the cyber core being late, then, if you notice basically that a unit is made out of the Zealot before the Cyber Core was started, then before you get these 2 racks like I'm ready to get normally, you should get the bunker, and you should try to micro these Marines and maybe have an SCV over there to tank the damage versus the first Zealot. It means your opponent's attacking you really early, and unless you have good micro, you're going to have a hard time holding it. So make sure you build that bunker as soon as possible, and you have an SCV or 2 to tank some damage while your Marines are dancing around trying to defend. If you don't see anything like this, you just see a normal gateway, gas, and cyber core all on one gas, and they don't have much chrono boost, then you can feel safe. You can wait, like I did in this game, the 3 racks over here and then the bunker, and then you can get the gas. Or if you see a Nexus first, then you can just skip the bunker entirely and go straight for the double gas before this command center is even done. And that way you'll have faster stim, faster Medivacs, faster combat shields, faster +1. Everything will be kickstarted a little bit earlier because you're moving your gas count a little bit earlier. And so those are the 3 things you can really scout. Oh, sorry, I didn't mention what the third one was. The third one is if you get into your opponent's base and you see 2 gas geysers. Now, 2 gas geysers means that they won't be attacking you with a Zealot, or if they do, then they won't have anything else, maybe a Sentry, and you should feel fine. It'll just be 1 Zealot. But if they have 2 gas geysers with 3 in each, it's not like some sort of Sase style where they have 2 in each gas and they're trying to do an expand anyway. If they have 2 gas geysers with 3 probes in each, then you need to be worried about all-ins. And the possible Protoss all-ins that there are